I left for a funeral. When I returned, my neighbor had moved the boundary fence 4 feet onto my property. "You can't prove where the line was," he said. I didn't argue. I just pulled out the survey map my grandfather left me. I've never really left home. Not in the way people talk about leaving. I've traveled for work, taken short vacations, been to a few weddings, and lately funerals. But I've always come back to the same stretch of land off County Road 18, just outside of Fulton, Missouri. I live in the house my grandfather built in 1959. He laid the foundation himself, one concrete block at a time, while my grandmother brought him lemonade in mason jars. This place is as much in my blood as it is under my boots. I've kept it up the way he would have wanted. The barn's still standing, although the paint's peeling. The gravel drive crunches the same under my truck tires. The trees along the edge of the property still creak the way they did when I was a boy trying to sleep through a summer storm. So when I came back from my cousin's funeral in Little Rock and saw that something was off, I felt it in my chest before I saw it with my eyes. The fence line was different. At first, I thought I was just tired. It had been a long week. Driving down for the funeral, staying with my Aunt Jo, watching everyone try to keep it together over casserole dishes and bad coffee. When someone young dies, people don't talk much. They just stare into their laps and nod a lot. I pulled into my driveway that Tuesday afternoon, and something just didn't sit right. The corner post by the pecan tree, the one my grandfather planted back when JFK was still alive, didn't line up the way it always had. I parked the truck and walked out into the field, counting my steps. It should have been 17 paces from the edge of the pond to the fence. It was 13. I froze. Looked left, then right. The posts were newer. The wire was shinier. Someone had moved the damn fence. And not just by a little. 4 feet inward. Over the course of 137 feet. Clint, my neighbor for the last 8 years, was standing in his backyard. He had a can of beer in one hand and his stupid yellow lab sniffing around by his shed. I walked up to the fence, leaned on it like I was just curious. "You move this?" I asked. He looked at me like I was asking the time. "What's that?" "This fence. It's not where it used to be." He didn't even blink. I just adjusted it. The old one was off. I had a guy look at it. Said it wasn't straight. It was straight. My grandfather built it. It's been in the same place since '63. "Well," he said, in that too casual voice some men use when they know they've done something wrong, "you can't really prove where it was, can you? Over time, these things drift. Wind, soil shift. You know." I didn't respond. Just nodded once. All right. Then I turned around and walked back to my house. Up in the attic, in a sealed plastic bin under a stack of old hunting jackets, was a manila envelope with brittle corners. Written on the front in black marker, faded with age. Land Survey, Grandpa Harlan, 1963. Inside was a full boundary map. The kind drawn by hand, with angles and degrees and hand-signed signatures. My grandfather had been a precision man. His property lines were gospel. I drove to the Callaway County Recorder's office the next morning. Sat down with a clerk named Brenda, who'd worked there since I was a teenager. We pulled up the digital plat. It matched my grandfather's paper copy to the inch. She printed me an official certified version for $18 and stamped it with the county seal. Then I took pictures. Of the old fence stumps that were still visible in the dirt. Of the tree roots that had wrapped around the original posts. Of the Google Earth images that clearly showed the old fence line as recently as 2 years ago. I didn't call Clint. Didn't talk to him at all. I called a property attorney in Columbia. 3 days later, he sent out a professional surveyor. They measured everything. Marked the true line with flags. Turns out Clint hadn't just taken 4 feet. He'd pushed the fence in along the entire southern boundary, effectively claiming 0.12 acres, which might not sound like much, but here, that's the difference between a full shed space and a clean run for cattle. And legally, that's trespass. Intentional encroachment. Theft of land value. Still, I kept quiet. Until Clint got served. Clint didn't take it well. The morning he got served, he came storming across my field like he owned it. I was on my front porch, working on fixing a busted screen door hinge, when I heard his boots crunching through the frost-covered grass. "You serious with this?" he barked, waving the court papers in the air. I stood up slow. "Dead serious." He laughed. The kind of laugh that's more about anger than anything else. "You could have just come to me. We could have worked something out." "You mean like when you moved the fence without saying a word? That kind of working it out?" He opened his mouth like he had something else to say, but nothing came out. Just clenched his jaw and looked down at the paper again. "I'm not backing down," I said. "You knew it wasn't yours. You did it while I was gone." He looked up. "I didn't think you'd even notice." That part stuck with me. He didn't think I'd notice. Like I didn't know every inch of this land. Like my grandfather didn't walk me along those lines every spring, pointing out markers and rocks and tree stumps like sacred text. A week later, his lawyer called mine, offered to move the fence back and cover the survey costs. Said Clint was willing to make peace. I told my lawyer no, because this wasn't just about dirt. It wasn't about the 4 feet. It was about a man who looked me in the face and lied, who used my absence, my cousin's death, as an opportunity. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a move. And Clint wasn't done trying. About a week after that, I noticed the corner of my barn had been hit. Not major damage, just a dented siding panel and a busted drain pipe. Looked like someone backed a truck into it. No note. No knock on the door. I checked the footage from the little trail cam I'd put up near the barn to catch coyotes. Saw Clint's old Dodge idling by the side before the screen shook and cut out. He knocked the camera off the post on the way out. I printed the photos and gave them to my lawyer. Then I called the sheriff. They came out, took a report, and added vandalism to the growing list. 2 days after that, Clint installed a floodlight on his back porch facing directly at my house. Bright enough to keep me up at night. I told the county. They fined him for light pollution. He paid it and then installed a second one. It wasn't about light anymore. It was about pushing. He'd made this personal. So I made it legal. My lawyer filed an amendment to the original claim. Now we were adding harassment, property damage, and emotional distress. I wasn't sure that last one would stick, but at that point, I didn't care. I wanted him to know I wasn't going to be quiet. I wasn't going to be polite. Every document I submitted, I printed a second copy and kept it in a folder marked for Grandpa. Every photo I took, I labeled with the date and time. I wasn't just fighting for the land. I was fighting for the kind of man my grandfather had raised me to be, steady, quiet, but never soft. About a month into the legal back and forth, I got a letter in the mail from the county. Not an email, not a phone call, a real envelope with my name handwritten on the front. Inside was a formal notice. Clint had filed a counterclaim. He was accusing me of harassment. Said I'd been intimidating him. Claimed I'd been following his family around the neighborhood and creating a hostile environment. Even threw in that I had installed surveillance equipment aimed at his home. It was all complete garbage. The only camera I had pointed at anything was the one near the barn. And I had footage proving he was the one who knocked it over. But now I had to respond to his claim. My lawyer told me it was likely just a tactic. He's trying to muddy the waters, she said. Make you look unstable. Make it seem like a petty neighbor dispute instead of what it is, theft. Still, it worked on my nerves. I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering what else he might make up. And then one morning I woke up and saw tire tracks through the side yard. Deep ones. Someone had driven across the edge of my property, where the ground was still soft from rain. Left a long muddy scar from the road right up to the old chicken coop. I knew it was Clint. But there was no proof this time. No camera. No witnesses. That's when I realized I had to get ahead of him.
So I took 2 steps.
First, I hired a professional property management service. Had them install permanent surveillance, motion-activated cameras with night vision. Posted the signs, made it all legal. Every inch of the boundary was now under 24/7 watch. Second, I went to the town meeting. I'd never been the type to speak in public.
Never needed to.
But I stood up at that mic, hands shaking, and told the board exactly what had been happening. I laid it out plain.
No dramatics.
Just facts. I brought copies of the survey, copies of the vandalism report, and even screenshots of Clint's floodlights aimed straight at my bedroom window. I didn't ask them to fix it. I just wanted it on record. The part one didn't expect was what happened after the meeting. A woman came up to me in the parking lot. Said her name was Denise. Lived 2 doors down from Clint. "You're not the first," she said. I looked at her. What? He's done this before. Years ago. To the family who lived where you are now before your folks took it back. He moved their fence too. Pressured them out of it. Said the line was ambiguous. They didn't have any proof, and they didn't have the money to fight him. I just stared at her. She nodded like she knew I was putting the pieces together. He plays dumb, but he knows what he's doing. He waits. Watches. Then takes. What Denise told me kept looping in my head. He waits. Watches. Then takes. That wasn't just Clint being a bully. That was a pattern. A strategy. And now I had something new, a possible history of doing this to other people. Maybe more than once. So I did some digging. Spent the next 2 weekends down at the county recorder's office going through property disputes and complaints involving Clint's name. There wasn't much, he was careful. But in 2012, he'd filed a quiet title action against a vacant lot that bordered his. Owner had been an elderly man who'd moved into assisted living. No heirs listed. Clint claimed the boundary line had been unclear, got the court to approve it, and absorbed half the lot legally. And just like that, he owned more land than he'd bought. He did it again in 2016. Same method. A rental property where the landlord had stopped maintaining the fence. Clint corrected the line, and the renters never challenged it. He filed paperwork, claimed adverse possession, and gained a sliver of extra yard. Always just a few feet. Never big enough to make headlines. But always more than he started with.
I printed it all out.
Every form. Every document. Took it straight to my attorney. She stared at it for a long time. "We can show a pattern," she said. "This changes everything." That week, she filed a motion to include Clint's history of boundary disputes in our case. It was a long shot. Judges don't like bringing in old issues unless they're clearly connected. But ours were. Same method. Same wording in the complaints. Same quiet approach. Then something I hadn't expected happened. I got a letter. Not from the court.
Not from the county.
From Clint's wife. It was handwritten. Not long. Just 3 sentences. "I'm sorry for what he did. I didn't know he did this to others. I told him I won't be a part of it anymore." That shook me. Because all this time, I figured she was just like him. Cold, unfriendly. Stayed on her side of the yard. But now I realized something else. Maybe she'd been watching too. Not helping, just watching. And maybe that's what finally broke her. 2 days later, Clint's truck was gone. Not just for a day, for good. His wife filed for separation. I heard about it through the clerk when I was dropping off another document. She moved out a week later. For sale sign went up in the yard the next day. But the case wasn't over. Because even if Clint left, the land dispute was still real. The fence was still up. My property still showed the encroachment. The claim was still active. And Clint had one last move. He filed a motion to dismiss everything. Claimed since he no longer lived there, the matter was resolved. That the land dispute was no longer relevant. My lawyer just smiled when she read it. "We're going to bury him. The fence is back where it belongs now. But I still walk the line every few days, just like Grandpa used to. Not because I'm worried someone will move it again, but because I finally understand why he did it. You don't do it to protect the land. You do it to remind yourself where your edges are, what's yours, what you'll stand for, and what you won't let anyone take. No matter how quietly they try to do it."